The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
Hello and welcome to Practically Magick. This is Courtney Pearl. I'm a pagan folk witch, card reader, healer, spiritualist, Celtic priestess, teacher, artist, and mystic seeker. I've been discovering true and real magic, and I wish to share it with you. I'm going to pull a card for today's episode. First of all, Pryn Hawn Da, good afternoon in Welsh. I am going to be discussing the next Wheel of the Year marker coming up when this episode is released. And so I am using my Seasons of the Witch Oracle deck today. And it's very specific because I have several different versions of this tarot deck. Oracle deck. It's an oracle, not tarot. If you're not sure of the difference, we'll discuss that in a different episode. But I'm here with my Beltane oracle. I have one that is Imbolc, and I have one that is Samhain, and I believe they have several other versions of this deck. I love it because it can so perfectly embody the visuals, the aesthetic of that particular time of year. So as we're going through kind of the Wheel of the Year, we talked a little bit about Ostara during that time of the year and that episode. We were celebrating the beginning of spring, the spring equinox. But truthfully, the ancient peoples didn't really celebrate the Easter or the spring equinox so much as they celebrated the other in-between times more. So Beltane's going to be a really special one, and we're going to talk about that more today. But I'm going to use this oracle deck to pull our card for today's episode. And I love this deck because it has a beautiful gold foil around the outside. The Imbolc one has blue, shiny foil, and the Samhain has a red. And it's just, it gives me the tingles when I see something sparkly or shiny. So I love that. And the card that I have pulled for today's episode is the cow. And for those who would be able to see this card, I have no doubt that you would love it because it looks like one of those fuzzy Highland cows that people are crazy about all over the social medias. Pictures of people getting them as pets and bringing them into their homes. I mean, these cows are just adorable. So what I love about the picture, the image in this card is that it's a beautiful watercolor image painting of a Highland cow, big old horns, fluffy brown fur. You can't even see its eyes. Its eyes are covered by its fluffy fur. And it is crowned with a flower crown, which we're going to talk about has a lot to do with Beltane. And this deck on the back of all the cards has bees as sort of its mascot, sort of its symbol. It has bees flying around the cow. There's red flowers all around it. And the caption on this card says, "May the embrace of all that is nurturing you awaken in all that you are becoming." I love that. So what I am reading from this card is that our sort of hills to overcome for this year or this season of life, they have not been addressed yet. So if you feel like you're really in the battle of things, or you're looking to accomplish something and you're about to undertake something really important, this card is letting us know that that's ahead of us. There is more more mountain to climb, more hiking to do, more to this path we have not quite gotten to yet. But that's not a scary sort of ominous doomsday message. I'm very much getting a lot of support in this card. It's the nurturing in the caption, as it says, nurturing you awaken in all that you are becoming. So there is more to this becoming. There is more to this journey. And the flower crown on the cow is sort of like a blessing. And it's almost like this message of being anointed with the powers and the gifts that you are automatically given, that you are already endowed with. And it is about going through your next part of this journey with exactly what you need to go through it. Being armed with what you require and having the trust and the faith that you have what it takes to get through this. If that makes sense. And this can be interpreted a lot of different ways, but there are a lot of like red poppy type flowers around in the field around the cow. And anytime that I see that sort of flower, and I'm not exactly sure that this is poppies, but that's what's coming to my mind. So I'm going to read it as if it is. When I see that, I remember how in England that is the flower of remembrance of people who've gone. And so I feel very much like this is the cow's journey. As the cow is blessed to be able to go on this journey, he or she is also very much loved and supported by those who've gone before. And so it's kind of like having that team of angels or that team of spiritual guides, that you're never really truly alone, that when you call upon them, they're there. And whether you believe in an afterlife or not, it doesn't really matter, because the energies of remembering those people that have gone before you, the trials they've overcome, the strength that they may have had in their lifetime, calling upon that is real. And that does give more than one might have thought possible. So taking a moment to remember them, taking a moment to call upon that, to let that inspire you, to give you that spark that is required to move forward, is going to be an essential part of this next step. And I love that this card came up, because actually we are going to talk about some of the traditions and symbols of Beltane. Beltane is also called May Day. So as we get into this story, I would like to talk about kind of a story of the Green Man and the May Day Queen. And these celebrations with these symbols or figures or characters are still done in Europe, in a lot of European countries to this day. Even a lot of the countries that it's not necessarily understood or taught what the symbols are or where they came from, or have been Christianized over time to be kind of interpreted with a Christian lens. These are very much like pre-Christian symbols and ideas that have kind of made their way through the folklore, through the traditions, and are still practiced and celebrated even now. So I'm going to talk about the Green Man and the May Day Queen. So this is sort of they call him Jack the Green in some places in England. They'll do a parade. You'll see figures, plaques, statues, certain things with this Green Man. And he sort of looks like he's a face made of foliage. He looks like he's got, leaves for cheeks and hair and eyebrows. Sometimes he's associated with the horned god of the pagan traditions. And, there are some associations there. But the Green Man, or Jack the Green, I have seen some video footage and some things where in the parades, instead of it being a man, or even like a man who looks like he may have come from another world, where he's kind of, I don't know, almost like a Peter Pan, but fully grown kind of vibe. There are some depictions of him in these parades and celebrations where he's literally just a blob of foliage. Like there's no face to him at all. It's like they just took a man and they just dressed him in a suit that is made completely of moss and leaves and vines, and you can't see a person in there at all. It's just kind of like this blob of greenery. So it can show up in a lot of different ways. But there is sort of like a symbolic wedding that happens where they take a maiden representing the May Day queen or the bride, and they have something like a ceremony. She's escorted through the streets by a young man, or she might be escorted by Jack the Green or the Green Man. And it's sort of like going back to the days when there was a lot of ritual around sovereignty, when a chief of a tribe or even a king or a lord was to take that position of ruler or king, landlord. If he was to take that position, he would have to have something that looked like a sacred marriage. And the sacred marriage might be to a queen. It might be someone who stands in, a woman who stands in for this marriage. But it's like the king has to be proven worthy by a goddess or someone representing the goddess or a priestess. And this sacred marriage between them was the king's symbol of marrying the land. So women were, or in this case, the woman is a symbol of the land itself. That when a king agrees to honor and care for and respect and be a steward for the land, he's going to do this in a sacred marriage. So I believe that all has a lot to do with these Beltane celebrations. So I know that's not so much like a story, but just if you can imagine this May Day bride or this May Queen bride, she would be decked out in white. She would have flower crown on her head. She would have been chosen specifically for this honor. Yeah. And so they would have her paraded through the streets and it would be a huge celebration. So Beltane is also known as May Day because it happens on May 1st, and it is a very important milestone for people in the Wheel of the Year. As I said, during like Ostera and Imbolc, I know it would seem like the equinoxes and the solstices would be the most important times because there is a very significant astrological solar event happening during those times when the night is there's the most darkness. Words coming to me. That's when the winter solstice is a mark of the longest night of the year. And, the summer solstice would be when the day is the longest of the year. So these are like solar events. But actually, during the springtime, it wasn't as much celebrated as a big event because people were very busy. They were busy planting and getting ready for planting season. And there was a lot to do. When it starts to warm up and the winter is done, there was a lot of cleaning out to do and taking inventory of their storage. And, it was a busy time. And so there wasn't necessarily time to stop and have a celebration. But Beltane, or in Welsh, it's Calan. These are the traditions and festivals that we most associate with the blessing of the land. So there are a couple of different rituals that would have been significant. One of my favorite depictions, and I don't know if anyone else is familiar with this story, and it's kind of pulled from traditional folklore and things like that, but I think some of it is just fictional and it just was made up. But in the book Mists of Avalon, which was one of my favorite books growing up, wanting to be a priestess of Avalon, this was when they marked a very, very sacred time to the pagans, to those that worship the goddess. And they would take a maiden who was consenting to this ritual, ideally, and they would mark her as the maiden, as the May Queen, or the one who was going to perform the rites of fertility. And then they would have someone who represented the stag or the horned god. And there would be a great hunt. So the warrior king would go for a hunt. And they do this in the Mists of Avalon for Arthur. Arthur, when he's young, is taking place in this ritual because he is supposedly going to be the next king. So this is kind of like his test that brings him to the point of being chosen and blessed as the king of Britain. And a lot of times there were certain rites and rituals performed. There is no actual evidence or proof that we know of that shows that there were uh, relations happening during this, but it could have been part of the rituals and it could have been part of the celebration of fertility, that it's possible that that happened at some point in the ancient times. The ancient peoples, would bless the land by literally spilling the seed onto the land and things like that. So I'll let you use your imagination in being able to picture what that might be like. But I will just say this, that a lot of times the traditions that have survived all these years, such as the Maypole, have roots in those pagan symbols. So here we have a pole, right? The Maypole. You've seen people dancing the Maypole probably in movies, TV shows. You may have even gone to festivals around May 1st and they've had a Maypole there. They usually have children dancing around it or women. I've seen it done where they teach everybody the Maypole dance, and there's several of them, and then everybody does a dance. The idea is that there are ribbons tied to the top of the pole, and each dancer gets a ribbon, and then you do a certain dance with the music where you're weaving in and out of all of the people in the circle so that the ribbon is actually braiding and weaving onto the pole, so that by the time you're done, the pole has been decorated with all kinds of different colored ribbons. Now, this pole usually has a bouquet of flowers coming out the top of it. And I don't know if you can kind of connect yourself with the symbolism of what fertility has to do with a pole with a bunch of flowers popping out of the top of it. But I think if you've ever experienced a situation in which you are intimate with another person, and that person being a male, you might understand what happens and what that might look like if that symbol, the Maypole, is a phallic fertility symbol. So even that has survived without a lot of people even understanding what that was or how that started. But one of the other reasons I absolutely love that we pulled this card with a cow on it is because some of the other rituals and practices that happened during Beltane was that they would have bonfires. Bonfires and fire rituals are incredibly just rooted into our most primal selves. Just who doesn't love a good bonfire? Or even like what it would be like to get a huge fire going and then have everybody in the village or everybody in the family dancing around the fire and just feeling the energy of that. So what they would often do, one of the things that happened around this time of year is they had bonfires going around the fields. And when they were getting ready to release the cows into their summer pastures, they needed to actually walk the cows through the bonfires in a sort of cleansing ritual. And this is a very practical ritual. It's basically just allowing the smoke to smoke out all of the bugs and ticks and whatever kinds of little things had been living in the cow's fur during the winter months. Just allowing the cows to pass through the smoke and through the fire would kind of cleanse them. And so you can talk about fire being a cleansing element spiritually, but actually physically too, because the cows needed to be cleansed. They needed to be washed and they needed to have those little bugs and critters smoked out of their fur. And then they could go off into the summer pastures. So it was kind of like getting the cows out to their next place, going through the threshold and blessing them in a way, smoke cleansing them, right? And a lot of the bonfires were very, used for cleansing too, in that the spaces needed to be cleansed with smoke, needed to be kind of, like the way that we use smoke cleansing spiritually. I know you've probably heard of a lot of people who do saging as part of a cleansing process. It is something similar to that, but it is more on the aspect of like cleansing the spaces in homes or even like burning anything that was in the home that may have, become stagnant or could make people sick or things like that. They could burn those in the bonfires and then restart for the new year. They could burn dead things that were left over from last fall that had, that needed to kind of cleanse the spaces and gardens so that they could get ready for planting, things like that. So a lot of those bonfires it was a practical thing to do, but it was also kind of a spiritual ritual and a kind of burning off the old year and ready to kind of invite in the new energy of the new year, the sunshine and the festivities and the eating and the abundance and everything like that. So they really depended, ancient peoples depended on the abundance of their crops and growth to survive the next winter that was coming. So this would be a time of the year where crops are being planted or had been planted already, and they are really wanting to do everything that they could to bless the land, to appease their deity, their higher power, to bless them with abundance so that their crops would grow and all, and that they would be able to have a good harvest season so that when harvest season came, there was a lot of food ready to survive another winter. And, we really don't stop to think about what that must have been like, that if they didn't have an abundant harvest in the fall, there was a good chance that family members would not survive the winter, that new babies being born would not survive, that the small children or the elderly would not survive, that they'd starve. And they really relied on that harvest season to produce what they needed. So if this Beltane represents the time of planting and the time of blessing, they would probably be creating a lot of spells and rituals and prayers based on blessing the land to be fertile. Now, this applies to us in modern day when we start thinking about what sort of spells and rituals do I want to put into place here at Beltane at this moment in my year or in the season of my life that I would like to become fertile and abundant. What is it that I need to start manifesting for myself and then creating ritual around that story? If I want that story to look like, I am going to be by the end of this year or by the end of this cycle, I'm going to really be starting to bring in more money and helping my family be abundant with wealth. Then I'm going to start putting into place the rituals and the practices that manifest that particular kind of wealth, that kind of energy. What would it be like if that was what was planted and what was growing and what was then going to be harvested at the time when it's ready, right? So that gives us an opportunity to really use this mark of the year and what the ancient peoples used it for and say, how can that apply to me in my life? So I like to create rituals manifesting things, wealth, prosperity, using the fire element, whether it's a bonfire we have our little fire pit in the backyard that we can use for this ritual. We have our witches' torches that we made at Imbolc, or, even a candle, something as simple as that, or just being able to stop and sit by the fire, by the hearth fire, my fireplace in my home, and just take that opportunity to write in my journal and start thinking about what do I want to start manifesting. It'll be kind of coming to the time of year where the indoor hearth fire ceases. We turn the gas fireplace off and we start doing our fire pits outside because the weather is nicer and we're starting to stay outside more and the light brings us out until later in the evening. It's also a really great time to start thinking about what those fertility rites meant for us, even if we are not in our maiden stage of life. So for the maiden to be participating in those kinds of rites would be like, okay, so obviously this is moving from maidenhood into motherhood, like that kind of abundance, that kind of, I am just starting out with an idea of something, but then I'm going to be pregnant with that idea. And then it becomes created into the world as if I've birthed it and mothered it from then on. So everything has kind of its season. And as we talk about in magic, a lot of times we talk about the idea of the maiden, the mother, and the crone. And this doesn't just have to do with women. This has to do with anyone and the cycles of your life. We are not just the maiden and then just the mother, and then we move into the crone. That isn't actually how it works. We are all three at different times and for different reasons. And I like to think of it as, we're a maiden when we're trying something new and when we're starting something new. We are a maiden because we haven't experienced it yet. It's kind of like the virgin for what we're about to experience. You are starting out in that way, but then when you become, pregnant with an idea, it's not just a physical, literal pregnancy, giving birth to a baby. This has to do with the cycle of creation that you are putting into steps of what needs to happen in the creative mind to manifest this thing that you're trying to birth. So then when you put it into the physical world from mental and emotional and where it's sitting in the liminal space of being pregnant, which means like we can't see it physically yet, but we know it's there. It's percolating. It's the ideas, the brainstorming, all of that kind of thing. And then when it's ready to be birthed, it's like, I've decided what I want to do. I've decided how I want to do it. And I'm going to take action into making it physical in the physical realm. So as you were creating spells and rituals, you are also thinking about the phases of these ideas. What is it? What phase am I in? And am I really stopping to appreciate and give honor and respect to that phase? I mean, all of us want the wealth and we want it to be just now. We want to attract wealth and we want to be wealthy. But it's a lot harder to be able to go through and honor the phases of, I know I will be wealthy. Right now I'm sitting in the idea of wealthy. Right now I'm going to let that pregnancy have its time and to let it percolate in the womb for a little while. So think about that as you're getting ready to write what your rituals are and what are you going to put together for this Beltane time of year? What are you going to need? Are you going to need certain herbs, certain colors, certain textures, certain sounds, certain songs? Where do you want to perform these rituals? Do you want them to become daily rituals that you start doing at Beltane and you do all the way till summer solstice? Anybody can keep up something for 6 weeks if they can just think, well, this is my Beltane ritual. So that means it's going to go from here and into for the next 6 weeks, right? So take into account those types of things. Some things to really use as an opportunity to harness this magic of Beltane. I would recommend creating rituals of manifesting and really allow them to incorporate sexual pleasure or flirtation or even the shedding of clothes. Because I know that sounds like I'm telling you to go and just get naked running around in the woods. But that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how when the weather warms up and we start to feel like we can show our skin to the sun again, the feeling of warmth and the feeling of nurturing and the feeling of letting the universe provide for you and taking pleasure in that is really an experience that will help you kind of connect with that energy. What does Beltane really mean? And why would the ancient peoples use that as a fertility, a time to be kind of excited about that? This is especially helpful when you're looking for excuses and reasons to reconnect with someone in a romantic way. If it's like, oh, things have been really stale lately because we've just gotten through winter, we've had like 3 layers of clothes on all the time, it's hard to kind of step out of that frame of mind. Or if you're really into the mother energy and the crone energy, you might have been really distracted with other projects and other things. And to re-engage with that maiden energy is to be like, oh, I forgot how much fun it is to flirt and to show a little skin and to be like connecting with the people that I love. Yeah. So take that into consideration as you get ready to honor this Beltane season and to engage in the festivals of this time. Honor the divinity of the body as much as the soil of the earth. That's what I wrote down. I thought that was kind of profound. Plant the desires into the earth to manifest love, money, and other abundances. So That's what this time of year is about, really planting those into the earth and nurturing them to grow, giving them sunlight, giving them water, giving them the air to breathe, even the air out of our own mouth, if possible. And the breath, as it was in the New Testament, when you hear the word breath or you read the word breath in the Bible, oftentimes it was translated actually as a sharing of breath or a sharing of souls or a kiss. So if that doesn't give you an excuse to get a little friendly and flirty with your loved ones, your special someone, then I don't know what is. But Beltane is a great time to really just pull that energy in and just have a little bit more fun with it. I am so excited to hear about your own personal connections with this festival this time of year and what it is. If you've never celebrated Beltane before, if you didn't even know what it was, how are you going to utilize it in your life to make magic? I would love to hear about that. So please connect with me and let me know what are some ways that have given you some new ideas. For me personally, I have really enjoyed connecting with other people in remembering and reclaiming those Northern European ancestral practices of the Wheel of the Year. And so that's why I love signing up for and going with the Nourishing Kin. My Nourishing Kin group is a group that has dedicated to education and to reconnecting and to finding those spiritual spaces together within the Wheel of the Year. And so when they taught me about Beltane, when they helped us engage with it, they didn't just teach us about it. They brought us together, and we'll be doing, certain rituals and certain connecting practices that are just rooted in ancient inspiration, but are sort of something that we came up with ourselves. And I love that. We have a May Queen who blesses us and anoints us. We have bonfires that we do. We do the Maypole. We have our dear friend, Elisa, is someone who lived in England and Scotland for a time. And so she brings some of the things she's learned, like the dancing. I can't remember the name of the dancing at the moment. I should have looked it up beforehand, but it was where they wear the white socks and bells and they have scarves in their hands and they do the dancing. It's usually done on the hill. I can't remember what it's called, but you can look it up, and they do that in England. She teaches us those dances and helps us to reconnect with our ancestral roots of what did our ancestors in Northern Europe do during this time of year, that we can start to help connect with that motherland and also the land we currently live on at the same time and give honor to that. All right. Thanks for listening. I hope this gave you some inspirational ideas of some things to do at the time of Beltane. And if you would like a particular special Beltane card reading with my Beltane Oracle deck, please get a hold of me and we will do one just for you. I can do private card readings, and I will be using my Beltane deck for the next several weeks for card readings on my Instagram live and other things. So get in contact with me if you want to do that. Next week on Practically Magick, you will get to hear my interview with Stacy Milhorn at Pure Sweat and Float in South Jordan. I'm so excited for you to hear this experience that I had talking to Stacy in the sauna at Pure Sweat and Float. It is an amazing place with a lot of really great health benefits and a lot of magic. So that is what we will be talking about. That episode is going to come out next week. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be a really exciting one. And please remember to use magic in your everyday life to strengthen relationships, heal, prosper, and thrive. If you would like more information on these and other subjects, I can be found on social media at prism_healing is my Instagram, at prism_healing, Facebook, Courtney Pearl, and Courtney Pearl's Prism Healing. You can see my events coming up. I will have a Tarot for Tips event coming up soon. And later this month, I have Healing Through Art and a kids workshop called Heart Smart Art, immersive experience to raise emotional intelligence for children and adults. So that's coming up in the middle of the month, and Healing Through Art is usually at the last Thursday of the month. So if you would like to sign up for those events, those are going to be incredible experiences. If you live here in Daybreak or in South Jordan or anywhere in this part of the Salt Lake Valley in Utah, please plan on coming to one of those events, or all of them if you would like. I would love to see you. And if you would like more information about this podcast, about the services that I provide and offer through Prism Healing, you can look at my website, prism-healing.com. Private sessions for healing work, card readings, workshops, events. I do Reiki appointments and emotional processing. I also have a blog on my website that has resources for each episode. So I'm going to gather some episodes about the Green Man, the May Queen, Beltane, things that I've learned, and Nourishing Kin. And I will post that on my blog. So if you are interested in any of those things and would like to learn more, please look out for my blog on my website. I would also love to hear questions from a listener. If you have a question about your personal life, about magic, about healing work, about anything that you think I might have some help directing you, please write in on my website or on my social media. You can private message me a question and I will feature it on a future episode. All right. I would like to thank personally, first of all, my Nourishing Kin group, a group that I belong to that is dedicated to reconnection with our Northern European ancestors, rituals, and traditions, and advocacy for local Indigenous peoples with donations to Restoring Ancestral Winds organization. I would like to thank Jess Blaine at Ride the Wave Media for producing my podcast and working so hard to make me sound like I am doing a great job here. And I would also love to give a special thanks to Sarah at Daybreak Treasures Boutique for featuring me as an artist on her website and sponsoring my events. And I will see you next time, witches and wizards.